By taking a look into our past, it's easy to see the poor working conditions that were normalized before the Progressive Era.
One of the most notable incidents that demonstrated these terrible conditions was the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. This fire became a large part of our history and was essential in shaping who we are today.
In this factory, the owner found that the employees were leaving too often and locked all of the doors to ensure that the workers stayed in the building. But that door was the only fire exit, and a fire had started in the building.
The fire escape collapsed during the rescue effort. Panicked workers were crushed as they struggled with doors that were locked by managers to prevent theft or doors that opened the wrong way. Outside, firefighters' ladders were too short to reach the top floors, and ineffective safety nets ripped like paper. The fire killed 146 workers. This is just one example of the poor working conditions that were faced during this era. From 1888 to 1908, 35,000 workers were killed and 536,000 were injured.
During this time of dangerous work, there was no workmen's compensation. Workmen's compensation ensured that all workers and their families received money if the workers died or are injured on the job.
Installing workmen's compensation in the United States was critical at this time. Countries in Europe had already begun insuring their workers through workmen's compensation. With all the deaths and injuries in the United States, it was necessary.
Thomas J. Barton was a night worker on trains. He had to support 7 children and earned only $9.50 a week. He was run down and killed by one of the trains, and after his death, the company offered him nothing. His 16, 18, and 14-year-old son all had to leave school and begin working. They earned less than he did.
During this time, there was no such thing as minimum wage. Workers were paid whatever their employers chose to pay them. The campaign to institute a minimum wage was started by women because women living alone would not be able to support themselves if they were continuing to be paid the amount that they were being paid.
The first minimum wage was installed in Massachusetts in 1912 and only applied to working women and girls.
Another substantial problem during this time had to do with child laborers. Youth served as newspaper and clothing sellers, coal miners, messengers, and mill workers, and no one saw this as a problem. But oftentimes the conditions small children were working in was such as coal mines would harm their future health.
The goal of these reformers was to improve the safety working conditions and to benefit from their work. Too often, workers were being treated like dogs and didn't get enough pay to support their families.
Today, when we take a look at these conditions, we see them as extreme and unordinary. Thanks to the reforms of the Progressive Era, many changes have been made to better our society.
Now, when you take a look around us, there are certain rules and regulations in all organizations and workplaces in the U.S. In schools, we see protections such as sprinklers, fire alarms, and smoke detectors. These small changes can and have saved lives.
Change in worker safety has resulted from a combination of forces that include safer production technologies, union demands, improved medical procedures and antibiotics, workmen's compensation laws, and litigation. Because of changes like these, the number of fatalities between 1900 and 1979 has dropped by 96%.
Minimum wage is also a large part in our society and is often being changed as we evolve. It has most recently been set at $10.10 in Connecticut.
Men's work hours were cut in half during the 20th century, and by 1980, real earnings of American non-farm workers were about 4 times as great as in 1900.
Today, due to the changes in our economy, middle-class citizens have the luxuries that not even a millionaire would have in the 1900s. We now have a Department of Labor which prepares American workforce for new and better jobs and ensuring the adequacy of America's workplace.
Improvements and benefits have also been made. Many jobs and organizations now offer benefits for workers such as child and elder care benefits, health insurance, life and disability insurance, retirement investment plans, and vacation time.
Although these changes are significant, it would be wrong to say they were completely successful. Reforms are still needed so that we don't revert into our pre-progressive state.
An example of poor working conditions can be seen with Apple employees in China. They have started to speak out about their conditions over the past few years, and BBC News even made a documentary evaluating information about the factories gathered through undercover reporters.
The video showed employees falling asleep on the job around live wires and showcased other cruel treatments they received. In 2010, 14 workers killed themselves, and as a result, Apple promised to improve their working conditions. But after further investigation, it was clear they were not following up with this. Even nets were added to the building so workers couldn't jump.
Employees are forced to stand for 24 hours without a single day off during the week, and they live together in crowded dorms with exposure to dangerous chemicals. 2 explosions in 2011 resulted in the death of 4 workers. Finally, almost 140 people were injured after using toxin, according to New York Times.
Factories like this are referred to as sweatshops today and are more common than one would think. We tend to forget how industries use cheap, exploitative labor. Examples of popular stores whose products are produced in sweatshops are H&M, Forever 21, and Urban Outfitters.
Another example which occurred in the U.S. had to do with McDonald's employees. In 2015, in a span of just 2 weeks, 28 workers in 19 cities complained about their conditions and how they were prone to injuries.
This began as what was known as the Fight for 15, where they were fighting to raise for their pay, and encouraged the Department of Labor to take a look into their conditions.
These examples show that around the world, even in 2016, reforms are still needed. The reforms made in the U.S., although impactful in areas such as child labor, were less successful in maintaining proper working conditions.
It is known all around the world that there are people unsatisfied with their pay and working conditions. In order to establish the society we aspire to be, and to set a good example for other countries, we need to continue to make the changes to satisfy the needs of the people.
Many people are still not happy with the minimum wage, and we need to determine how we can raise it and enforce it. We also need the Department of Labor to play a more active role in evaluating all working conditions. Too often, poor situations go unnoticed until deaths are involved.
By doing this, the United States will become a more prosperous nation with more opportunities to benefit the majority and influence its success into other nations who face similar problems.